Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. Before we get into it with our guest here today, I'd like to remind everyone, if you enjoy this content, please give a like and subscribe down below. I greatly appreciate it. We have Victoria on the podcast. She's a U.S. Navy veteran. She has a Frenchie that we just saw right before we started this podcast, which, I mean, everyone go and check out her Instagram page if you want to see more of that. It's a very cute dog. She's also a bodybuilder, and she's done powerlifting as well. So, yeah, she's done a lot in the health and fitness field, and, yeah, we're just on here to share her health and fitness journey and just discuss all things health and fitness. But most importantly, she's our current guest, Victoria. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hi, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, we're not going to talk about the weather because I made that a point, before we start recording, even though it's not that bad outside. So before we get into that tangent, to get things started, why don't you just go through your journey and what inspired and motivated you to get in shape and how that's led to where you've been at right now?
Absolutely. So we'll try not to make it too long,
Take
but
as much time as you want. Trust me. I hate hearing myself talk.
it started basically when I was in the Navy active duty. I did 4 years. I was stationed in Hawaii, volunteered for a deployment to Iraq. And what I knew about deployments from everybody I had seen, they either come back absolutely ripped in amazing shape or they come back obese. Like they go and they work out or they play video games and eat at the DFAC. And I was like, well, I don't want to come back obese. So I guess the alternative is to start working out. So I just bought a bunch of men's health magazines and I was like, all right, I'm going to go to the gym when I get there. And I got there and I thought I was doing my thing. And then there was like a army sergeant that was like, come here, you are going to kill yourself. Like took me under his wing. So basically for about 6 months, he made sure to teach me like technique and form. And that was my first like real integration in like how to not hurt yourself in the gym. And it was nothing crazy. Like I remember the first time I tried to bench the bar and like he handed me the bar and it went right to my chest, like 45 pounds. It was pathetic. By the end of like the 6 months before they were getting ready to rotate out, they had me in like a bench competition and I was benching 150. So I was like, okay, apparently I'm decent at this like working out thing. I'll stick with it. So I did and never really thought anything of it. Again, it was just me in the gym, just staying healthy. Got back from my deployment after a year and just continued. I ended up being like the go-to person, like, hey, we see that you've lost some weight, gained some muscle. Like, how can we do that? So I was just helping people. Ended up getting a bachelor's degree in sports and health science with a concentration in exercise science because I knew I needed to like use my GI Bill and get a degree. But I was already within the career field that I wanted to be in. And they were like, get it in something you enjoy. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. Exercise. So I did that, got out of the military and just continued training. Moved to Charlottesville, Virginia, went on another deployment to Afghanistan, was there for a year, continued to like really just focus on the training and working on strength, but also building my physique with no intentions of doing anything. Got back to Charlottesville and somebody kind of put a bug in my ear, like, what do are you competing? When's your next show? And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. And then that was probably like May of 2015. And then by like October, November, I was doing the Jay Cutler Classic in Baltimore, doing women's physique. It was great. There was like 7 or 8 of us females. It was my first show, only bodybuilding show so far. I placed fourth out of the 6 or 7. The 3 girls that beat me, epic rock stars. Like most of them were like upper 30s, early 40s, had been in the sport, had competed. They just had the muscle maturity over me. Like there was no hard feelings. I was like, this is amazing. So it was great. It was a learning lesson. Continued just to train hard after that with no intentions of competing again because I hated starving. Like it was miserable. My coach, I'm still good friends with him, but he had an option of hashtag team no cardio. And I was like, that sounds amazing. I was military. I was forced to do cardio. If I can just starve and not do cardio, let's go that route. Well, I didn't realize that that's not a great option. So for like the first 7 weeks, I was eating 1,002 calories a day. And then the second 7 weeks, I was eating 772 calories a day. Like putting sticky notes on jars of peanut butter around me, it was a whole thing. So like, don't do that. Do your cardio, eat your food. Don't do what I did because it was not great. It works. It does work. It's not smart. Long term, mental, physical, all that good stuff. It's not fantastic, which is why we're like almost 10 years later and I haven't competed again because it was pretty traumatic afterwards. Um, so then got back just to normal, life. I put on some more weight, put on some muscle. My body like kind of transformed after that. After, just being in that like crazy restriction, like my hamstrings grew, my legs just grew like crazy. My strength went through the roof. And I was like, okay, cool. And I was bored one day and got on YouTube. And I remember seeing like Meg Squats and Gracie Van Oz talking on this YouTube channel. And I'm like, Meg Squats, like she's little, like, yeah, she's strong, she's fine, but like she's like world renowned, quit her job, making all this money, like YouTube superstar, power lifter. Like, but I just like lifted more than her in the gym like yesterday. Like, what makes her like so different? And I was like, literally nothing. It's just that I had not ever considered powerlifting. So that was my transition into powerlifting. Again, it was like a 14-week prep. I started working with Gracie Vanaz directly. She was out in California. Um, and just learned as much as I could from her. I already had really great technique in the squat, deadlift, and bench by then, just from the bodybuilder style I was already doing. My ex is like, he loves form and technique. He's all about it. So, like, I was already benching over 250 with like, you couldn't slide a piece of paper underneath in my back, my butt, or anything when I'm doing bench. Like, I was spot on. So, to be able to then, like, arch my back and widen my grip on the bench, like I was up near 300, and it was, I had to do very little. So it was, I know, horrible. It was kind of crazy. So I jumped into the Virginia State Open. It's towards like the end of the year. Came in and like again, I'd never even been to a powerlifting meet. So like I thought all the chicks were going to go together and all the guys were going to go together. And then all of a sudden, like I'm in this wave, but like all the and then they start having some of the lower like body weight guys go, and then they call me out, and I was like, wait, why am I lifting like amongst the guys? And it was because I was already, my first attempt was already heavier than some of the men's lift. So I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I ended up doing amazing, over 400 for my squat and my deadlift. I think my bench for that one may have been like 270 maybe. Um, like 8 or 9, whites. I was just good. I did great. Internationally lead at that point, qualified for the current US Open. Best lifter of that meet. So I got my fancy sword, it was a whole thing. People were mad because even existed. So, they're thinking they're the strongest in the area because, they know the competition, and I came out of nowhere. So I hurt some feelings, but it was kind of cool. Did the US Open with people like Steffi Cohen and Stacy Bama Burr, and just the most amazing people when it comes to powerlifting and, powerlifting influencers at that time. I think that was 2017. And of course, I didn't necessarily belong in that platform, but on paper, my numbers qualified me for it. So I was like, whatever, I'm going to go. These people are amazing. I'm going to go do it. So it was fun. Got to do that with knee wraps, which are horrible. I am team sleeves. It's just one more thing you have to worry about. It's just too much. So then that was like 6 months later, 6 months again, went back to the Virginia State again, beat on my state records, increased my bench to I think like 280, and then got best lifter. And that was my last meet. I was supposed to do the US Open again, but my tendonitis was so severe that I couldn't even get under a straight bar any longer for back squat. So that basically ended it. So I just basically since then really have just been training. I call myself kind of like a poser bodybuilder, power lifter. Like I like to look the part, throughout the year of a bodybuilder, and people be like, "Oh, do you work out?" I'm like, no, that's always a fun joke. But then still like go to the gym and outlift some of the power lifters for no apparent reason. But it just got to the point where like I'm getting older. I'm going to be 38 this year, so it's like you start getting these little tweaks and stuff where you're like, oh, I'm sore. But like once you start injuring yourself, then it becomes like a game changer. Like I live by myself. I've got my pups that need to eat. I have a job. So like to tear a bicep, which I did back in March, and be in a sling and that kind of stuff. Like it's very inconvenient. It's not like, life shattering, but it's very inconvenient. And, working out is not paying my bills, and it's never going to pay my bills. It's just been kind of a hobby or a passion. So that has actually got us to where we are now, which like your timing for asking me to come on was perfect because I was already kind of in this mental dilemma of transitioning back into like competitive bodybuilding. So I hadn't like publicly announced it, but like folks that know me are like watching my Instagram, and my coach just started posting. So like we have made the decision that I'm going back into the competitive realm of bodybuilding because I need that focus, like you and I were talking about. Like some of us just go overboard on things, and it's not always a bad thing. It's just to what extent, and then, what price we pay for doing that. And just me being, what I consider myself lifestyle, the past, how many years just doing my own thing, it's going to lead to an injury that is going to cause me some heartache. So bodybuilding is going to allow me to kind of lessen the amount of weight that I'm moving. It'll give me a very specific goal. People who are kind of like, watching me, a coach who's relying on me to, make sure I make him proud, make his business continue to excel, by doing the right thing. And so it seems like the safe bet right now. And again, the only reason I've stayed out of it for so long was just because my initial adventure was not fantastic. And again, being out of it and now seeing it how it's supposed to be done is a game changer. So I kind of wish I would have done it sooner because I definitely, again, I'm getting older, so I've lost out on a lot of years. But I think it's prime time. I know you have already interviewed my girl Jess Coleman, who was an absolute rock star, and I reached out to her. She was one of the people I actually talked to before I finally made the decision. And I was like, does it make sense? And I was like, I know that you are more mature in your career before you even got your pro card. Like, does this make sense? She was like, I don't even know what your question is. Like, let's go. And so like that was just like it. There was like all this stuff that was just kind of like falling into play, and then you reaching out, and I was like, I'm getting too many signs. Like it's time to get back into it. So that's where we are now. So I'm back getting into the competitive bodybuilding world. Have an amazing coach out of Virginia Beach, who was just on point with everything and just realistic about what we're doing. We're probably not even going to step on stage till mid to late next year because again, we want to grow my lower half, work on posing. So yeah, so that gets us to today.
So if you're the version of you that couldn't even bench the bar were to look into the mirror and see this version of you look back into it, what would your young version think, do you think?
It's really crazy. I have some people in the Navy that like we finally connect on social media, and they're like, "Is that like the same Sukar? Like, what have you been doing?" And I'm like, "Yeah, just working out." Like, it's just again, it just comes to that like obsessive nature that some of us have, and especially some of us in the military, we really get it. So it's good to find like an addiction and an obsession that is like positive. Again, we have our negatives because then we do take it overboard with certain things. But yeah, I don't think I ever thought back then that I would be where I'm at now because again, I hated working out. I hated running and all that stuff. Like once I really got back into it, like I was doing like Sean T Insanity videos in my barracks room. Like and I was like a skinny girl, like 135, no muscle, like just skinny. So this was not even a thought.
What was the gym situations like in Iraq and Afghanistan? Because like if you see movies, you'll see like those little gyms that they might have set up just in the middle of nowhere. But was it like that, like in the movies, or did they actually have like actual setups?
Depending on where you were. So I was pretty fortunate when I was in Iraq. I was at one location that was kind of crappy. Then we ended up in Baghdad, and so we were like in one of Saddam's old palaces, like marble floor and Wi-Fi. So like we had some legit gyms at that point. And again, I was on the tail end of those. So the tail end of Iraq, everybody leaving in the tail end of Afghanistan. So there wasn't a whole lot of war going on. So everything was kind of like hardened structures, fully built, years of trying to support the soldiers and all the service members that were already over there. So I worked out really good. Like I had great equipment, basically everything you can imagine. We even had like legitimate CrossFit affiliate gyms in Afghanistan. So I did a little bit of CrossFit while I was out there. So yeah, I never missed a workout, that's for sure.
That's why when everyone says why is the U.S. military so good, I'll just use that as an example, saying we built CrossFits in Iraq. Basically, we took over a country and we built a CrossFit in there, and we built McDonald's and all those other places.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
that's that's why we can basically just annihilate their culture and just put our culture in there. Which I mean, that's again that's incredible that there's a CrossFit there. I wonder what the people. Did you ever have any interaction with people and like what they thought of that kind of stuff there?
No, like the local nationals that I did have, encounters with, they had already been working for the US government for so long on base that like they was like talking to, you and I. You forgot that like when they're done working at the end of the day, they go outside, the walls. You're confined to almost like a college campus and you just kind of forget because you're going through your day to day. But yes, it's all normal life.
Yeah, well, and how long did it take you to really start seeing those? Because you said by the end you were like getting up to like 150 bench. Like, how long did it take you before you could work that way up, or was it something that was quick for you, or was it like over time incremental gains?
Yeah, so that initial jump was really it was like a 6 month time frame because they had already been there for about 6 months, and so he worked with me up until like his last day before they went back to the US. So that was quick, but it's like, and that's what I tell a lot of the younger guys and girls that I see in the gym now that are starting early. Like this is when you're going to get your most gains. Like early on, you're going to make such insane jumps and increases in your physique and your strength. Like get after it now and take advantage of that because someone like me that's been around for so long, like now to make those changes physique and strength wise, they're so minute because you're already at like a certain level that now you're trying to figure out how to break through kind of to that next level. And a lot of us don't ever get there. You just kind of stay in that same like plateau, and that's where you hang out. But yeah, early on, I made just crazy significant jumps in my size, my strength, everything.
Those damn beginner gains, I tell you, if only they
No.
could stick around for a little bit longer. But you talked about you tore a bicep. What does that feel like? Because I have talked to some people and I've neglected to ask that, and that's one of those injuries where I don't imagine I would like that pain.
Yeah, so mine, I tore it back. It was like February 28th of this year. Again, my boredom. I decided that I was going to start strongman. It was around the time of the Arnold. I had a couple buddies that compete. My coach was at that time my strongman coach. He was awesome. He was also competing in the Arnold Amateur, and I was already like, we were just playing around doing like certain things like the sandbag throw, and like I was already beating numbers of like some of the girls competing at the Arnold Amateur. And I was like, whoa, I'm going to be real good at this. So my deadlift right before then in January, my conventional with straps was 523. And that's not like a one rep max. That's just like, that was the heaviest I got to before I transitioned into to strongman. So 523, with the deadlift bar. And so once we decided which competition I was going to do, it had a deadlift medley. So it was the axle bar and a regular deadlift bar. It was going to be set up with four things, increasing a weight from like 325 up to 420. Again, significantly less than what I'm used to. So I didn't think anything of it. And we're like, let's do this for time. We're going to not use straps because, again, to do your figure eights, it takes time. So I was like, cool. So I set up in my gym, got everything rock and roll, go through the first one, get to the axle. Well, I'm not familiar with the axle, and I hadn't done mixed grip in years because I've been doing double overhand with straps. So the bar was with the weight, I think I was at 345. And so I, get up underneath of it. My left arm is my underhand, and I put the bar too high up on my palm so that when I was up underneath of it, and once I finally stood up, you couldn't really lock that arm out straight like you should in a deadlift. Like your arm should be just like eight hangers; they should just be down. They should not be actually, holding the weight or strength. And so even in my video, if I watch it today, once I stood up with that like 350 on the axle bar, my left arm was almost like curling the bar. Like it didn't look like it was heavy. I just stood there, and all of a sudden, like a second and a half later, you see kind of my arm like go to its, straight down. And I was like, oh, well, that's not great. And so I was like, well, nothing's like bruising. My bicep hasn't fully retracted. Like I didn't tear it. It's fine. I go through the rest of my workout, like pull, the elevated axle. It's over 400. I do the rest of all my cables for my back and everything. And then my coach was like, just in case, because we're like 3 or 4 weeks out from a competition, like go to urgent care, go figure it out. And I get there that night after like 3 hours of waiting, and she's like twisting my arm and pushing. She's like, there's no bruising. I think you're fine, but like go to ortho tomorrow just in case. And right off the bat, like the ortho goes and like shakes my hand and turns it. And he was like, oh, yeah, it's definitely tore. Like I can see it. And he does like a thing like a hook test, and they can tell. So it was a distal near complete rupture. So the outer part of my bicep where it meets your forearm was still attached, whereas the inner part had detached. So there was only a little piece kind of hanging on. So we finally, got our MRI, got surgery done. So that was like a fantastic surgery. They basically like go into your arm, they make a little slice, they pull down that part of the bicep, they drill a hole into your forearm bone. They then anchor this little button to your bicep tendon, and they pull it through, and it anchors through. So like for 10 days, I was in a sling and splint, which was fantastic. And then I got into this really awesome, I called it my bionic brace. It's like one of those, the black brace that has like a little adjustment on it. And so, I mean, they said 14 weeks and I would be back to 100%. And it was less than 14 weeks. I was already, back to deadlifting and benching, no problem. So I recovered really quickly. And I think it was just because I was already in decent shape when I hurt myself. And again, my coaches were just fantastic that we like increased my calories. We continued to train my right arm, my lower body. I mean, surgery was on a Thursday. That Tuesday, I was in safety squat with a bar, like just squatting, like people looking at me like your arms in a sling, like go home and rest. I'm like, nah, I'm good. Ain't got time to rest. So like I recovered really quick from that, but it wasn't as excruciating. I think if it was like a full, rupture, I think it probably would have been pretty gnarly because I've seen some of those videos too. But the fact that it was still kind of holding on, like I went to the Arnold and was like hanging out, like I was in Ohio. I'm like, yeah, tore bicep, yeah, great times. But it kind of got me through it. But yeah, it was inconvenient. And again, that was my real only like injury ever, since 2010 it's starting. Like I've had some hernia repairs, but that's just like your body, That's it's not anything I did out of the way. I'm just prone to them for some reason. But that was like my first injury where I was like, all right, that was really inconvenient. Like if for some reason I were to do something to a leg and I can't drive, it's like, all right, we got to be smarter about this.
It's the most meathead story I've ever heard that you still go to like a show or whatever. Just, hey, look at my torn bicep. Yeah, that's all
Yeah.
that. No, but that's great. And I mean, I love talking to people who, when they first get started, they always have that one body part that really, really takes off that they don't have to train as much. And then they have that one body part that just drags behind, they have to train to oblivion. What's been one body part throughout your journey that like you don't really have to train it? And then what's been one body part that like you have to train it like 3 times a week?
So thank goodness for genetics. My traps, I don't
I was
ever
gonna say if
see.
you didn't answer that, like I can't. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty
Yeah.
pronounced. Yeah.
My traps are 100% genetic. It doesn't matter if I'm like 175 pounds, like ripped, or if I'm 175 pounds and little frumpy. Like I have just got traps. I rarely do shrugs or anything like that. It's just there. For me, I would say anything like I'd like to say glutes, but that's just because I'm lazy and I refuse to do it. I'm one of those ones that like I hate to even be like that, but I'm always like the bikini girls that are always like doing nothing but like butt workouts. I'm always like, no. So now I can't do any glute exercises because I made fun of them for so many years. So like now I just have to suffer and suffer by like guys have to suffer because now I have no butt to look at. It's fine. But so yeah, like when I got with working with my new coach right off the bat, we're like, we gotta obviously start training glutes, hams. I just don't have a great posterior chain connection, my muscle connection, and I learned that when I was competing in powerlifting. That like I could never sumo squat or wide stance squat because I just don't have the strength in my glutes or my hamstrings. My hamstrings grow, but I can. I mean, to do stiff leg deadlifts or RDLs, it's like the death of me because I just don't feel it. So then I end up working other body parts, especially like my low back or, other things to kind of overcompensate. But yeah, I would definitely hamstrings and glutes are just my lacking point.
Have you ever thought about traps? Like, let's just see how monstrous they can get. Like, let's just go all out and see. Like maybe let's just get it to like where it's like touching my my chin basically or something like that. Because I've
I
seen some of those
really
people.
should.
Yeah.
I think if I actually train them, like legitimately train them, I think they would get out of hand. And like when I first got back into like after my surgery and stuff like that, and I had taken a couple years off from like legitimately training, just focused on like cardio and yoga and stuff like that. And like again, I still had traps, but like when it was time to like grow again, like my traps were getting bigger, but then it was like, oh, that's cool. But now I have to like, I'm not symmetrical. Like now I have to build my delts out. So like as I continue to grow, my traps grow faster and larger than everything else, and then it makes everything like disproportionate. So it's like this constant thing that I'm chasing after. Which again, there's far worse things I could be having to deal with than crazy genetic traps. But
I mean, powerlifting and bodybuilding are so different too, especially when it comes to training, when it comes to diet, when it comes to almost everything. Was it a struggle for you when you went from bodybuilding to powerlifting and then vice versa when you went back to bodybuilding? Or was it something where you're just so used to this lifestyle that like the changes didn't really impact you that much?
yeah, the nutrition, I mean, I think for anybody is the hardest. Anybody can go to the gym, anybody can train. The nutrition's difficult. I didn't have any, nutrition or diet issues prior to that first show. Afterwards, I definitely had some issues as far as like the way I looked at food and that kind of stuff. But I've always, for the most part, even in the military, because sometimes you get places and your food choices are limited. So I've always been real good about like I can stick to like chicken and turkey and ground beef and rice and potatoes, like pretty standard stuff. Growing up, we ate leftovers on the regular, so eating the same thing for 3 4 days in a row is normal to me. So that was it was super easy when it came to like meal plans and stuff. I personally prefer macro based. So, like, the only time prior to like right now I've ever been on meal plan was that particular instance for my 2015 bodybuilding show. For all three of my powerlifting meets, and since I've done macro. So, as long as my coach and I know what macros I need to hit, I can eat anything, and I like that option because, again, I'm still, even to this day, working on my relationship with food so that it allows me to prioritize things. Like I know that at the end of the night, I always want sweet. So when I'm like programming for myself, all right, here's my numbers. I know I want a sweet at the end of the night. If it's going to be ice cream, if it's going to be some kind of cake or cookie, that's programmed first. And I build the rest of my day around it. So that way, otherwise, like if you think like, oh, I got to eat clean all day or whatever, but then like you hit your numbers and then you kind of feel bad when you have a craving at the end of the night. Like if you account for all that and you know what you enjoy, macros are super easy. So that transition into powerlifting, it was just more food, but it was still macro based. So it was super easy. Transitioning back now, again, even when I was lifestyle after that, I've been macro based up to 2,800 calories, and it's been great, no issues. And still, for the most part, Monday through Friday, I'm strict. Like I'll meal prep on Sunday. It's all the same meals. I don't have to worry about it, and I'm trying to be a little more flexible on the weekends. Whereas now, again, I'm meal plan, and I was bumping heads with my coach because I just wasn't sure that I'd be able to stick to it. But it's literally like it's bodybuilder meal plan. It's chicken, ground turkey, ground beef, like 96.4. It's jasmine or basmati rice. It's oats. It's egg whites. It's broccoli. But the way it's set up, it's a ton of food. Like I'm eating like 2,800 calories right now. My physique within like 2.5 to 3 weeks of just starting that has already transformed. Like my core is tighter. I have no bloating. I'm drier looking. Like it is just weird. So again, I love macro for normal people, for lifestyle. You want to look good throughout the year, but you don't need to look competition good, but you still want to perform well. Like macros are the way to go. It's sustainable. Whereas again, meal plan, in my personal opinion, like that's short term stuff. Like, yeah, you could do meal plan for 6 months to a year. Yes, there's some, high level athletes that do it for years because they're at that level. But it's just not necessary for the average person because the average person isn't going to stick to it. Like it doesn't matter how many options you're given. Once you go and have a refeed day or a cheat meal that some people like to refer to it, or you just hit that craving and then you go AWOL on it. That's it. You're done, and then you start feeling a certain way about what you're eating and how you're eating, and then it just snowballs. So macro is my favorite ever, and I'll probably go back to that at some point. But we really want to work on building my physique right now, and we're treating this time period as like a prep. Really, I hate to call it that, but since we're like a year out, but it really is. So we really just need to see how my body responds to certain things. So when we do have to dial it in, we really know what my body likes and doesn't like, what causes any type of inflammation, any type of bloating, and all that good stuff.
A question that I normally ask a lot of powerlifters is outside the gym, has there ever been a moment where you just discovered like your strength or you were just proud of your strength doing something other than lifting weights? Like, I don't know, like maybe like moving furniture, doing something like that. Or was there a moment where you're like, oh my God, like I can't believe I did that?
Oh, that's a good question. No, I don't think I've never had to like rescue any like cats from under cars or you know, I don't have any of those. I just, it's just constantly
You're
people
not that
see me
friend
out in the.
that you're not that friend that they call all the time whenever they got to move or anything.
Oh no, I am, but I'm that friend that doesn't pick up the
Yeah,
phone. Yeah, because I have to lift,
yeah.
heavy all the. I have to because I choose to lift, heavy all the time. I am kind of a real bad friend. Luckily, I don't have a lot of friends, so they don't have to rely on me for that. But I'm just like, I'm busy that day. I don't know what it is, but I'm definitely busy.
Again, people just don't understand that. Like, yeah, a lot of that is it's used for a purpose. So, like, when you're not lifting, they're usually just resting. They're not the most they're not the most entertaining people, I will say, outside the gym because they are just tired from working out, which is something that a lot of people do not understand. But let's be honest too, like you're not the average looking woman, especially if you're to walk out dressed the way you are right now. You are gonna get stares just because it's human nature. And like I like to equate it to being like a mini celebrity where it's just when they see something that's not the normal, they a lot of people are just fascinated by that. And you've been doing this for well over a decade. What's that been like, and have you gotten used to it over time, or is it still one of those things where you're like, okay, this is a little weird?
Yeah, so it comes in waves, it seems, and the big thing for me is folks not maybe understanding the lifestyle. I have actually been asked if I'm trans. I have been asked if I'm a male. I get called sir on the phone a lot. The normal stuff that I know a lot of us in women's physique and bodybuilding get, just because we do stand out. There are lots of people, there's a lot of females that constantly, are stopping me out and about and asking me how they can work on certain body parts and that kind of stuff. And they always know the answer. They know it's nutrition, it's what they need to do in the gym. It's just not everybody is ready to take that step. So most people are good about it, but you have some that are really just genuinely confused, and that's fine. Like I've never had anybody be mean about it. Some internet trolls. There's some nasty people online, but they're just hidden from the keyboard, and that's fine. But like in person, I've never had anybody like the trans comment was literally like somebody I had talked to numerous times in the gym. In my gym, I go to the shop gym here in Virginia, and it's a lot of athletes. Like we have two locations. The one location is like the pretty gym, like everybody aesthetically is just amazing. And then the other gym is more of like your warehouse gym. So it's like you've got big men and women in there that are training heavy, training hard. But like we all kind of understand the sport and how we get to certain points and look a certain way. So I had never thought anything of it at all. And like I said, I talked to this guy numerous times, and yeah, he asked me basically something work related and if I'd be interested in briefing, his office. And I'm like, sure, what would it be about? And I'm thinking like data or something. And he was like, you're trans, right? And I was like, I'm what? He was like, you're trans. I was like, oh no, no, I'm a woman. I've always been a woman. And his response was, oh, really? And I was like,
That's not a response that you want to have,
you're,
guys.
you're being serious. Yeah. Yeah. So I removed myself. I was again real nice to him. I was not trying to make him super uncomfortable. He was very confused.
Well, I'm sure he
Yeah.
wasn't trying to be mean, like, for anyone out there, it's like,
No,
he's
and
probably
he
mean, but he might
wasn't.
just be like, "Oh, really?" Like, that's yeah. But
Yeah,
again,
no, and
again, in the
he
moment, that's not something that you say.
no, it's like asking somebody who might be, like, a little bit overweight, like, if they're pregnant. Like, you're not being mean, you really wanna, like, congratulate them, but when they're not, you're like, "Oh." Yeah, and that's kinda how it was. It was that real awkward, but, like, he didn't apologize, so I think he was a little shocked, which again is fine. I sat and thought about it for a little bit, but then I was like, "Maybe it's kind of like a backwards compliment, like, it's fine." But, like, that's the only time that it's been a little weird, uncomfortable, but I've never had anything, like, super aggressive or, like, mean. It's just people are just curious.
Well, next time that if you're on the phone and they ask, say if you're male, you just got to make your voice as deep as possible and be like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about. What's going on
I
here?"
always
So,
just go with it. I
yeah,
just go with it because it's not even worth the
no,
conversation. Like, if you've already said my name, Victoria, but then you call me sir, it's not clicking, and that's
yeah.
that's totally fine.
No, and that's I think it has been getting a little bit better, but yeah, there's still always going to be those outliers too. But and again, it's a part of the journey that you have to deal with, a lot of ignorant people at the times. But yeah, and it's a lot of people just aren't familiar with it, and then when they get more familiar with the sport, then it really comes to be. But I can totally see how someone like from the outside who's never, who might have heard just the word bodybuilding, but like never even done their research on the sport might think that. But again, it's like just like me being in the Midwest, it's like just keep your opinions to yourself unless if they're hurtful. I mean, if you got something
Yeah.
nice to say, then go ahead and say it. What's probably the best compliment you've ever been given that you can remember?
Um, there's not just one that stands out. I do get a lot of people just congratulating me on like my years of dedication and the hard work, and just kind of ask me where that comes from. And I don't really know. Again, like we've gone back to a million times. It's just something that I've picked up and I've obsessed about for years, and just continue to build upon and grow and try and spread that knowledge however I can for others. But it's just usually that it comes down to the being recognized for hard work and dedication in something.
Yeah, and those are always great. And I have a deep fascination with tattoos. I've never gotten one myself, but you have a lot. If you want to, could you tell us the stories behind the tattoos and what they mean?
Yeah, so I do have a ton. I'd say honestly, about 90% of them have no meaning. I just like
That's what
them.
I've heard a lot, and it always shocks me.
Yeah, yeah. Most of them have no meaning whatsoever. So like the two swallows, I don't even know if you can see them. My two birds on my chest. That those do kind of have a meaning. Like when you're in the military, way back when there was like some stories that like when a sailor would leave their family, they would get one when they were departing. If they did make it back to their family, they would get the second one. So I did get those before I went to Iraq because I knew I was coming back again. Kush, something could have happened, but I was like, most of my stuff is just, I mean, it's just stuff I saw, thought was cool. As I've gotten older, I've been able to invest in, more highly skilled artists and give them an idea, and they do it because it is ultimately art. It's not here, this is exactly what I want. You need to like color in the lines and do this. So I do like that because then I'm always pleasantly surprised with what they come up with, which is great. But I've had stuff like my hands were my most recent ones. It was done by an artist here in Virginia. He's a Air Force veteran. He had a Frenchie too. Some of my work was done in Iraq. He was prior Marine Corps, I believe. He's got a studio out in Arizona. I've got stuff from just different states, different great people. The one artist who owned the original Sailor Jerry Collins studio in Honolulu, he's the one that did my two sparrows. So like, yeah, they all kind of have stories.
What was the most painful out of all of them?
Oh, most painful, I would say. is I have these little alpha and omegas on my wrist, and they're itty bitty, like the size of a dime. Those things sucked for no reason. I've got my hands done. I've got, up to here, like I've got my both of my ribs done. There was things that were uncomfortable, but like those little things for no reason sucked. Made no sense.
Again, like, I've talked to people that have gotten their entire necks done, and I always just assume that that was the most painful, and they're like, "No,
Yeah.
it's either wrist stuff or fingers or stuff, like, stuff that you
Yeah.
wouldn't think of that a lot of time you'd be like, 'Oh, wow, that was the most painful one?'
Yeah.
Not getting, like, your not
Right.
getting your everything up there tattooed, but again, it's the stuff that I learned while doing this, but just being that like you said, you haven't competed for a while, but you've followed the sport. What's that been like just to see how the sport's changed and evolved even in since 2015? Because even in my 6 years of covering this, like it's a completely different sport than when it was when I started 6 years ago.
Yeah, it really is. And it's been fascinating to kind of sit back and be able to watch and not really, get too much heartburn from it directly. I mean, I've been to Olympia twice, Arnold like 5 times. I've been able to see that, like, the sport is growing as far as, those who are watching and following it. The number of competitors is increasing, which is amazing. The athletes themselves are getting bigger, they're getting just leaner, more freakish. It's amazing. What I'm noticing the most at the lower levels, which does scare me a little bit, is there's still a lot of the politics. There's a lot of the buddy buddy stuff, a lot of the gyms and coaches that might know judges that might have friends within that are able to help their athletes a little bit better. Which I'm all about, like resourcing, and it's all about who you know, and that goes with everything. That's career. That's literally everything. And so it's all about how you kind of play the game. And I do kind of lack there because I kind of keep to myself and I don't really have like that friend group or anything. Like, yeah, the two gyms that I go to are really well known. I know a lot of, athletes in the area. My coach is becoming just amazing in the area. But like I don't want to win because of who my coach is or because I know a judge, or I want to win because of the package that I provide that day. So that makes me a little nervous. My younger sister has competed 2 or 3 times already, and this last time she did a show in Delaware, and she looked just absolutely amazing. And I was so proud of her. But it came down to there being a lot of local athletes from a gym in that area that like was sponsoring it. They ended up getting like the team award, but there was girls that maybe weren't nearly as conditioned, didn't bring the package that my sister did. And that's not even being partial. Like it was they used my sister for the flyer for this year, and she didn't even win. So like you're like, well, why didn't you use the winner? That's so weird. So like that it does make me a little nervous because again, there you still have to play the game and you have to understand that those things do play a factor. But I know that most of us doing this sport in any sport, like when you put your heart and soul into it and you suffer along the way, it's a little disheartening to get up there and feel as though you should have placed differently, and maybe didn't because of other outside circumstances you can't control. So that's what I'm noticing at the lower level. But I think that the higher levels, I think they're growing, and I think it's just absolutely incredible that still has such an amazing following.
Well, and I get to say this because I've been, promoting the sport and being a positive influence. You have to be a psychopath if you want to be a Bible. Let's be completely honest. Now, it's a good form of psychopathy. It's not like I'm going to go, kill 50 people type of psychopathy. But where does that come from for you? Where do you think that this mindset that you're able to do this? Because in the general public, like 99.99 repeating a couple more times, are not able to have this willpower.
Yeah, and that was again the willpower. That's a big one, and that was something that me and my coach discussed was whether or not I even had that still. Because again, I've been in this lifestyle for so long, in literally just the lifestyle realm where I could be, strict throughout the week, and I could drink my water and not have any alcohol and eat my foods that I've prepped within my macros. But if my coworker makes a baked good, I'm going to eat it because I'm not in prep, and I can enjoy it, and it's fine because I know that it's not detrimental to me. Or on the weekends, if I want to go out and eat something, I can. Whereas like once you once you start getting into that realm where it's like you can't cave, like you have to stick to this. I haven't had to do that in a really long time. Like so I haven't had like those real bad cravings or really felt a legitimate hunger pain where I'm like, all right, I have to go to bed because it's so uncomfortable. So that's why I'm glad that we're doing it, a year out, because we're going to be able to do, those kind of like smaller preps. Like we're growing right now, but between now and then, we're going to have to do a cut. I did like a mini cut from like 2,500 calories to 2,100 calories in the month of July, and dropped like 16 pounds, and didn't change anything other than, and that was like post surgery. So that's why there was some weight that needed to go and some water weight. But like I was pretty strict. I didn't eat any crumble that month, which was very painful for me. But I was strict. Like I didn't do any like snacking if I was hungry. Like I made sure that I planned accordingly. I did my normal cardio, and so like that was fine. But again, that was just 1 month. So like after that month was over, we increased my calories back up, and I went back to my lifestyle macros, and it was fine because I knew it's only a month. It's no big deal. But again, like 4 months, maybe 5 months of prep, doing something like that, like that's where it really comes to, you have to really trust in yourself and trust in your coach. And again, I really trust in the coach that I have now, and know that we're going to do things properly. And so I'm not going to be at 700 calories. I'm not going to be starving to death. It's not going to be like that. Yeah, I might be on the treadmill or the Stairmaster for an hour, hour and a half, but I'm going to eat, and it's not going to be so agonizing like it's been in the past. So I think that is going to help. But that willpower is, it's a big deal, and I get that even at work. People are like, "Oh, I don't know how you have the willpower. Like, turn that down." It's like it's not really willpower. It's just I just don't want it right now. Like that's honestly because give it to me in like 20 minutes. It might be a different story. But yeah, it's we're gonna figure it out.
Well, and body dysmorphia is definitely a huge thing in bodybuilding, and it's also in powerlifting as well, even though it doesn't really have a part to play in how much you're lifting. But I do talk to a lot of powerlifters, and they do suffer through a version of it as well. I don't think it's as extreme, but like, how do you deal with that? Because honestly, if you were to tell like a normal person, like, do I look big or anything like that, they would probably just smack you in the face and be like, "You're an idiot."
And I oftentimes feel bad because I definitely suffer from it, and it's something I worked with my nutrition coach with for a long time, because I definitely don't see what others see. There's times where like I'm in the gym and I'll take my same, side pose, and I'm like, oh, I look good right now. But then like, an hour later, or, prior that day, like you're not seeing it. But yeah, I'm still the same weight. I'm still the same, size. It's just visually not as like awesome looking. But like, I don't know, I just don't look at myself and see big, even like next to people. I'm not a good judge of it. And like people will compliment me, either in the gym or outside of the gym. And I genuinely thank them, because it oftentimes is when I actually need that as that like external source to like kind of like bring me back into reality. And I always tell them like, I'm not being like modest or like, no, like I genuinely needed that. I appreciate that you acknowledge that and you see that, because I need to hear that from other people, that the work that I am putting in is paying off, whether I see it or not. I don't always have the same appreciation for it, because it's hard to gauge when you're on the scale every morning, when you're watching your weight move and ounce here and ounce there. You don't really see anything until you really make those real drastic changes when you're in a prep or something like that. So you're almost like micro analyzing everything. Whereas like all it takes is just one person to just see you in your current form and just be in awe of it. And to be able to vocalize that. And a lot of women don't like to do that, because we don't like to be vulnerable and, compliment other women. But usually when it's from another female, that's usually when it means the most, because they're not just going to say it, unless they genuinely see that. So it definitely helps. But no, I suffer like most of us from it in a pretty extreme form. But it's something that I just constantly got to work on. And my nutrition coach, right when I told him I was gonna start working with a bodybuilding coach and get back into competitive realm, like right off the bat, he was like, "Is that a great idea? Like, do you think you're ready for that yet? And do I ever think that I'm going to look at myself in the mirror and like be 100% proud of like what I look like? Like, no, probably not. So if this is an opportunity to continue to grow, um, and better myself and continue to, to spread the word of the sport, it's just one of those things. It's just something we're always going to deal with.
So, if you mentioned how much it helps you when someone compliments you, what would happen if I were to walk up to you and be like, "God, you look small." Like, do you even work out? What the hell's wrong with you?
I have some coworkers that do that. They're mainly army guys and they're all assholes. But they do that just to spite me. But it's hilarious. Again, it's just you just got to take what you can, and most of the time people are being genuine and nice. But I do, when I do get those comments, and again, they're usually joking, and I usually just take it as, okay, it must be, opposite day or backwards
Oh,
day.
with
Like,
me, I would just say, "When did you stop working out?" And if you said,
yeah,
"I'm still working out," I'd be like, "Really?"
yeah,
"Oh, okay. Well,
yeah,
No, but I again, that's my little, evil side of me that I like to I mean, I did used to the biggest guy in college one time I did walk up to him and I just whispered in his ear, I said, looking a little small day. And then I ran because I knew he'd probably chase me down. So, I ran out of that gym right before that. And then he's like, the next day he told me he's like, that messed me up for like the rest of my lift. And
oh,
I was like, dude, you can't be that easy. Come on, man. Like, come on, grow a little bit of a spine now, but no.
right,
And it's
yeah,
fascinating, how like, yeah, a lot of people don't understand that the people that look the best from at least, bodybuilding size, they sometimes, have the worst body image out of people that don't. So that's one thing I like to tell people. It's like, that's why you don't insult people a lot of times, especially with bodybuilders, because like you have no idea how much they mess up in their
yeah,
minds themselves or how messed up they are when it comes to their body image as well.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
yeah, but and just so you're going back, you're starting bodybuilding. Have you decided what division you're going to compete in yet, or you're just going to wait and see?
Yeah, we'll definitely be in women's physique.
Okay.
I do not belong in heels at all.
If
Yeah,
you said
no.
bikini, I'd be like, okay, I'd go just to see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah, no, definitely women's physique. That's what I did at the Cutler Classic. I mean, if for some reason I, gained like 50 pound of muscle overnight and they were like, you're too big, you need to move into bodybuilding, that's an option. I just don't foresee that with my frame. Like I'm 5'6", I'm usually around like 175 body weight. So I just think that women's physique is a good fit.
Yeah, I'm 6'3", so that high body
Oh,
weight. Yeah, don't even get me. I'm 6'3", 205 right now, but it's yeah, I just that's why whenever I love going. I haven't been to a pro show yet, but I've been to like 3 of the amateur shows, and I meet like 6 or 7 guests there, and I just love how I can like rest my elbow on the top of their head basically when I meet them because they're all like 5'3" or something like that, and you're
yeah,
like God. But I think it's just it's hilarious when you see especially short people, but they're just so jacked and they're so
yeah,
compact that you're just like. But that's why
yeah,
I always have a soft spot for like the 6-footers that I have on or anything like that, just because it does take a little bit harder work to put on that
yeah.
size. But so you talked about being complimented by women. I asked my fiance if she had a question for you before I recorded this, and she said, ask her what the hell she does for her shoulders. So what do you do for your shoulders? Because I can even tell right now, like they're popping out basically. So please tell me that you do some magic on them because if you say it's just from working out, I'm gonna be angry.
Yeah, no, there's nothing special. What I have learned over time is that my shoulders do like a lighter to moderate weight with a higher rep. So early on, I was just pounding heavy weight all the time. It's just like, do, 1 to 3 reps of like heavy shoulder press and just, pulling weight. Then that's not what does it. It's that constant pump that you're chasing when it comes to delts for me personally. And that's where I saw an insane amount of growth. Um, Knowing that you also have like the 3 heads of the delt, it's not just like one. So, you see some people that aren't working, especially their rear delt. That's a big one. Once you get the real round, like pumpkin shape, your delts just look 10 times bigger and fuller. They have that dimension. And that's just been the focus point prior to working with my current coach. And, now that we're really working in that 10 to 12, that 12 to 15 range, 4 to 5 sets at just a weight that you're not swinging stuff. Like if you're doing a lateral raise and it's only a 10 pound or 15 pound, that you're able to get it up to the top and you're able to hold it for a second and then come back down. Like it's just a completely different mindset change from what I'm accustomed to. Because I can move weight, but that's all I'm doing is moving weight. So that's been a real focus. Is really that time under tension for all my body parts right now.
Well, and I try to tell my fiance as well, like you're not a bodybuilder. She's also 6'1". So I tell her like
Oh
you're not
gosh,
gonna put on the shoulder size of someone
yeah,
who's 7 inches shorter than you, even
yeah,
the shorter one. So I keep telling her it's like just realize that first of all, and then the other thing, like you're not following their nutrition and stuff like that. Where it's just she used to be a volleyball player, so it's like yeah,
oh yeah,
you're not going to be built to be a bodybuilder when you're a volleyball player. So just enjoy your height that you have. I always tell her, and then enjoy, and then your Frankenstein feet, as I call them to her. I always got to give her a little bit of crap on that, but we're gonna have a lot of giant children, so we're just preparing. We're calling it the Division 1 breeding factory is what we're gonna name it ourselves. So
I mean, I approve.
there's that.
Um,
Yeah, there is that. But yeah. And so, what plans do you have for the rest of the year? When we talk to you a year from now, where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding? Where would you like to be at just in your overall life? What are your plans?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I guess for the remainder of this year and the next 6 months or so is really just focus on growing. I gotta grow this lower half. I've got to really focus on posing. Posing is an art. I am not the most dainty, flowy thing there is. So I'm very robotic. And so it's going to take me a lot of time. Like, yeah, I might be able to get the mandatory poses down, but to be able to transition well and make them look good, is going to take me some time. And then, with women's physique, we have our routine that's usually up to 70 or 90, seconds, whatever it is. So like, you have to be able to perform, and that's not my strong suit. So I'm glad that we have some time, and I'll really be focusing on that. um, Career wise, I'm up in like the DC Nova area right now, so like I'm loving that. I've been here, it'll be 2 years in October. I was in like Charlottesville, Virginia, up around the University of Virginia area, since 2014, working for the Army. So just, I'm loving what I'm doing for work. I know that this area is just insane when it comes to career opportunities. So I definitely don't foresee myself leaving this area, for the foreseeable future. Um, as far as like, again, when we're going to compete, it sounds, my coach is, again, he's I think more excited than I am. He's definitely got it all figured out. So it sounds like mid to late next year is what we're looking. It'll most likely be around the DMV area. For the first show, we want to keep it local, keep the stress down, not a lot of traveling, and then from there, we'll see what we got to do. But I am, every day I'm getting a little more and more excited about it. And that, again, I haven't blatantly come out and like posted like, hey, I'm competing. But people are just seeing the transition of what I'm posting, what my coach is posting. And people are getting excited. And I think that's helping, because I do have, again, I never feel like I have a whole lot of friends, but I definitely have supporters and a support system within the gym that I go to. That, that community is just amazing. And then, my coworkers and my family. So it'll be good. It's keeping up that mental desire to keep going after it. After being in this like just lifestyle kind of, I don't know, track that I've been in for so long, because it's definitely different. But yeah, no, I think the next 6 months to a year, I think it's going to be good, especially when it comes to growing my physique. I really hate training legs, and I hate, again, the idea of training glutes. But I am excited to see what we can do, because I know how my upper body responds when I do actually dedicate the time and energy to training properly. So I think it'll be good. So I'm looking forward to it.
You're gonna hate me by saying this, but my legs have taken off so much just from walking recently. That's it.
Gosh.
I don't know why. Like my calves have gotten just exponentially huger. Like I don't understand it. Now again, I do wear like steel-toed boots when I go on walks, so maybe that
Oh
might
yeah.
have something to do with it. But like, yeah, I don't know why, and I don't mention that because legs were my number one body part that I hated myself as well, just being so long that I am. But it's yeah. But well, before we wrap things up, last question. You mentioned before like how traumatic the first prep was when you did your first bodybuilding show. How are you trying to mentally prepare yourself and be like, hey, it's not going to be exactly like it was back then. Like I have a different plan, but in the back of your mind, are you still like maybe a little nervous? Like I don't want to go through this again.
Yeah, and I think I think I have subconsciously been preparing myself for a long time, because again, my gym, we have a lot of athletes, and so I talk to them all the time, and I, don't really pry as far as like what they're doing and how their coach is coaching them, but I get enough information, and they enjoy the process and do more than one show and do the shows well, that I can tell that the way people are approaching it now is way different. So again, I think that's why I'm in a better spot now to have made the decision to jump back into the competitive world, because I know that, again, my experience was an anomaly. It's not normal. There's probably nobody else out there that does that or would recommend to do it. And again, getting into it and not having a background in it as far as like the competitive world, I didn't realize, how detrimental that would be to me in the long term. It just sounded like the easy option, and it was easier, I think, than maybe doing cardio back then. But it was just a detriment to, the future of me competing again. And again, working with my coach, I know that we're going to do really great things, because he's very smart about it. He's producing just amazing athletes right now that are doing just great stuff. They're not being hounded and pounded with cardio. They're eating, they're smiling in their posing pictures, and it's real. Like you could tell they're excited.
I can tell the
Um,
people that have cried right before they done their posing pictures. You can tell.
yeah, yeah. No, I've seen some rough ones, but no, they're excited, and so that makes me excited. And again, just talking to the athletes in the gym, it's going to be different. I have no choice but to allow it to be different this time. Am I still nervous? Yeah. Again, like I said, it comes back to can I or will I choose to stick to it and do what I need to do, and that's just up to me. But I think that we have enough time that I can continue to mentally grow that. And again, I know I'm not going to be at 700 calories, so I'm not fretting that at all.
Well, I look forward to seeing you through this journey and seeing you step on stage when you eventually do. And I mean, Victoria, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your journey with us. It was an absolute delight to talk to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot. Go and follow her on her Instagram page. I'll leave a link down below. But again, buyer beware. You will get inspired to get off that couch and stop eating all those Twinkies. But this is DD on the spot. Have a great day, everyone.